Welcome to the Coaching Book Club podcast, the show that empowers coaches through books. I'm Christy Stuber, here with my friend and co-host Ken McKellar. And today we're talking about The Promise That Changes Everything. I Won't Interrupt You by Nancy Kline. In today's world, independent thinking is needed more than ever. And this book talks about how we can cultivate this in ourselves and in all of our conversations. And here's what you can expect in this episode. First, we'll start with a quick overview of the book, what it's about and why it matters to coaches like you. Next, we'll break down some key takeaways that stood out to us and share how you can apply these insights to your coaching practice. Finally, we'll explore how these concepts connect to real-world coaching challenges and help you build confidence, tackle imposter syndrome, and grow as a coach. Whether you've read this book before or are hearing about it for the first time, you'll leave with actionable tools to strengthen your skills. So let's get started. Hey, Ken. What?
Now you're going back to my roots, baby. You're going back to my roots, right? Man. I know Nancy Kline. I took a course, not with Nancy Kline. She didn't run the course herself, but it was her course about the thinking and groups and sitting with thoughts. So not only did I read Time to Think, More Time to Think, but also The Promise That Changed Everything. And then she has another book that's written for her daughter, I think. And that was in a different language. I started to take classes to learn that language so I could read that book. And then I found it in English, but I hadn't read that book yet. But man, this one right here. All right, I'm gonna let you go first. I got some stuff.
I'm really excited to dig in. This is another book that has a density to it. Another book I can probably go back to and probably will go back to many, many times in the future. I was introduced to Nancy Kline from you, I believe, as you often have introduced me to many amazing authors in the coaching world.
Yeah, but I'm gonna need you to just kind of to pick up that energy level when you said that. Hey, I was introduced to Nancy Kline by my co-host, McKellar, something like along those lines.
Yeah, I have to do it. You do it so well for yourself. I will say I did not read Nancy Kline. No, it was assigned to me in a supervision course that I took with Damian Goldberg. And I read More Time to Think. And you kept pushing and pushing that this is the book. The Promise That Changes Everything is the book that we had to do on the podcast. And I'm so glad that you did. As always, you always have better recommendations than I could have brought for myself, because it really deepened the More Time to Think with research and this very bold belief and process for how Nancy Kline is executing on this belief that if one thing could change everything for the better, it would be the quality of people's independent thinking. And also along the way, in the past few years, I've been studying Bowen family systems theory. And there's, of all the concepts in that theory, there's a concept of differentiation of self. And that's defined as the ability to separate your own thoughts and feelings from others so that you can self-regulate and stay grounded and effective, even in emotionally charged environments. And so I've been trying to figure out, what does that mean for me? And Nancy Kline is another doorway into that for me to consider. So where should we start?
I when I first read Time to Think, I wasn't a believer. When I read More Time to Think, I was like, And then when I read The Promise That Changed Everything, it pushed me to experiment. And then when I did her class, then it showed up. Here's what happened. Because basically it was said, just listen. I was like, no, boo-boo, I got to say something. She said, no, Ken, just generative listening, just listen to ignite. And I was like, I may work in the business world, but not with fam. Just listen. So I took my kids to the pool, twins, 10 years old. And they wasn't 10 at the time, they was a lot younger, probably 8. And, they do their thing. they go back and forth arguing, and then I step in and I lay down the hammer. So this time I said, you know what? Nancy, let me see something here. So here's what happened. I was resting on the lounge chair. I had my earphones on, listening to a book. And then all of a sudden, I see Grace push Kendall into the pool. I see it. And I'm not allowed to do that. Not going to be pushing and not allowed to touch. I see it. So I said, I take my earphones off. I put it under the chair, and I put the phone under the chair, right? Out of sight is about them. I said, Grace. And she came over, Dad, she pushed me out of there. I ain't gonna let this push me out of there. I said, Kendall, go somewhere. I said, Grace, have a sit right there. I turned, I looked at Grace, and I just gave her my undivided attention. And she started talking to herself. She was like, I'm always getting in trouble. Okay. So, yeah, so I mean, the reason I pushed her because she pushed me the other day. Hold on. The rules are not to push. I'm not supposed to be pushing, so I shouldn't have pushed her. I'm sorry. Can I go play? I said, yeah, go play. And she got up. I didn't say a word. I was like, oh, Lord, Nancy. And I was like, wow. And that, I interacted with them a lot. It was like a truth serum. I was like, what happened in here? And step back and not say anything. And they start telling. And they start to negotiate. They start talking to me about what happened. And I'm listening to them, not necessarily for the answer, but so they can have independent thought. All right. That was long-winded, longer than I thought it would go. But I drifted away from that until I just recently read this book again. I was like, oh, you know what? Here we go. That's the chef kiss right there.
It's so hard to do, isn't it? To just sit and listen and not try to insert yourself, your judgments, your thoughts. Especially when it's your family, especially when it's your kids.
Yeah. It was hard to do the first time. But man, when you see what happens, when you see them processing, you see them thinking. So that was the pool. But also when I'm having conversation with them, put my stuff away and listening to them. And man, some of the creative stuff that they come up with. I mean, you get to the other side of that interruption. And what's over there, it's worth the price of admission. And the price is not interrupt.
Nancy Kline says that in the book. She says, we're all born able to do this. Mostly because our brains haven't evolved really enough to do anything. The problem is as our brains not evolve, but as they develop, as we get older, we lose the ability to be this attentive without judgment, without assumption, because we're just swimming in a world of polarization and different kinds of feedback that just soaks into our brain. And it sounds like to me what you're doing with your girls is almost reminding them of their ability, their innate ability to do this and then to be creative and resourceful all on their own by holding that space for them. It's really a beautiful gift that you're offering them. So here's my question. In coaching programs I've taken, I've been taught that as coaches, we need to interrupt. That I've been told, if my client is circling the drain, quote unquote, it's my job to interrupt them, to bring them back into a thinking state. And then in this book, it talks about how if I trust that my client is whole, resourceful, and creative and hold the space, they can self-regulate, just like your daughter did, as long as I can stay calm and attentive. And so this is my brain is pulled right in two directions. One is where I get it, and I believe that what Nancy Kline is saying is true. And the rule follower inside of me was like, oh, but I was told I should interrupt because that's my job as the coach in the relationship. I'd be curious what you think about that.
Well, I like what Marion Franklin taught. She did laser focused coaching. And one of the things that she said is when they're telling that story the first time, the first story, don't interrupt. Let them tell that story. And that was very much in line with what Klein is saying. Let them tell that story. Now, after we contract, so we're contracting for um, interruption. Like, I want to talk about the boat, Ken. And when I get out of here, this is what I want after talking about the boat. If I start talking about oranges and apple trees, then I'm going to need you to go ahead and put me back on task. Now, that is not Nancy Kline. That's coaching, right? The beginning, when they're telling their story, that is Nancy Kline. And I think Nancy Kline shows up with attention. She shows up with appreciation. She shows up with difference when she talks about hearing people's views and stuff. She shows up with information or challenges. So she shows up there, but most and foremost is attention, listening without interrupting, with respect and interest. I think that's the bulk of coaching.
I love the neuroscience. And so the science backs up, what you just said, that the generative attention calms the amygdala and allows serotonin and oxytocin to bathe the cortex, which then creates this environment where the thinker, the person who's receiving the attention, can then proceed with deep, untroubled thinking. And I'm wondering, as I'm still thinking through this, is when I show up wanting to follow the rules, again, quote unquote rules, how does that get in my way to provide generative attention in the beginning of a coaching conversation, right before I've even said the contract, which may then create more, not create more, but may not create a space where my client is able to think independently on their own, and then gets us into some kind of trouble where then we're not, and then they're not able to stop talking about the story because they didn't feel like they were heard the first time the story was told. So then they want to keep doing it.
So what are you saying? Sounds like you're trying to say something, but you're trying to hold back because
I think I'm experiencing a little bit of a thinking environment with you right now. We didn't talk about this, where I'm letting it come through and I don't actually know what it's trying to say yet. So I do need to kind of let it keep going a little bit. So let me try it again and say, if I'm not holding myself in a space where I can provide generative attention because I'm worried about following rules of the ICF, then when my client is sharing their story for the first time, the beginning of a coaching session, for example, in our contracting part, will they not feel heard? And so then will they need to keep repeating the story because I didn't do my part in being, I didn't keep my promise. So was I doing something to cause an interruption in their thought? The way I look, my energy, the way my head tilted, something that has more to do with what I was feeling on the inside. And because of that, they need to keep repeating themselves until they're certain that I've heard them. All right. How's any of that landing with you?
I know that there is a chance that the client may not feel heard. And if they are not feeling heard and finding ways to feel heard, that's a win. If I did something, right? I'm not doing it on purpose because I want my client to feel heard 100% of the time. But that doesn't always happen. So if they don't feel heard and they repeat it again, then to me, that's a signal that, hey, what's going on here? Let me listen even deeper with more intentionality, like hanging on to that every word, like it's my favorite sitcom, and I just don't know what's gonna come out of that man's mouth. I'm hanging on to it, like, with just such curiosity. Where's this going? What what's she gonna say? How does this make sense to her story? Right? Listening with that intensity, yeah, I trust that good things will happen.
And I think my theory is if I can do that, then I don't ever need to interrupt because my client's circling the drain, because they've been able to process whatever's happening on their own because I'm hanging on to every word, listening with interest. What do you think?
Well, I think sometimes I like to see a good movie for the second time. So we got to circle around that thing again, right? And I always get something more that I miss. Let's circle around that. So, I mean, you know, there's rules and there's coaching. Once I'm in the coaching, I'm more interested in that person that's in front of me. So anything can happen, right? It could circle the drain. It could come back. It could work. It could not work. If I have no expectations, there's no difference between not working. I mean, it's how they feel when they get out of it. It didn't work. I have had coaching sessions where if we're talking about MCC, PCC, or ACC, it probably would have failed the evaluation. But for that person, it worked, right? It's just the format of coaching makes it a whole lot easier for me to be consistent for the client and consistent for them. And part of that consistency is given a space where this feels different when I'm listening. They sound different to themselves when they're speaking, and they're able to go past that point of interruption because on the other side of interruption, there's possibility.
And we've barely scratched the surface here, and we've been talking for about 20 minutes. I know.
Part two.
Well, we revisit it. So what are you going to apply to your practice? Something maybe
No,
know or something new?
the best thing that I'm going to apply to my practice is this right here is a 6-month mandatory read right here. And I've taken their courses, so I have some really detailed stuff that I can go to. But still, just the reading was just, I mean, it was a great reminder. It allowed me to get back into how I want to be with my kids and how I want to be as a coach. And more importantly, for me, how I want to be as a human being. 6 months mandatory read. That's what I'm implementing today. New policy.
This book connects to what you've been talking about a lot, is how does coaching show up as humans? And to me, that's what this book is about. And so I agree with you. There's a commitment I want to make in my personal life to not interrupt. And in my coaching practice, following through in that, I'm also thinking about kind of combining Claire Norman's book, Cultivating Coachability, with this. And so how do we cultivate thinkability clients, or how do I cultivate thinkability in my clients? What do I need to do to create that partnership to let my client know that's what I want? That's what I want to be there for, is to help them develop their capacity to think for themselves.
Thinkability. Oh man, that just made me, I wish I would have thought of that. I'm kind of jealous over here. Ooh, that's good. That's good. How you doing, Claire?
I have the trademark now, thinkability. All right, Ken. Well, that's it for today. That's The Promise That Changes Everything. A book that reminded us of the importance of not interrupting and being with the person and listening to them. And we hope these takeaways have sparked new ideas for your practice and inspired you to dig deeper. Before we sign off, we want to thank you for spending your time with us today. Your commitment to learning and growth is what this podcast is all about. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to Coaching Book Club podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And for today, we'd love to hear from you. What do you think? Let us know. Thanks for being a part of our community. And until next time, happy coaching.